Joining us now, Washington, D.C., got a lot going on there. Congressman, Republican, 2nd District of Virginia, that's the Southeast Virginia area. He also has a influential seat on the all-important Appropriations Committee. Congressman Rigell, good to have you with us.
Hey, John, really good to be with you. Look, I really do respect you for going all the way out there, and I don't know if you set 2 alarms, 3 alarms, or what, but you're on a weird time zone there to be doing this, and I respect that.
Well, look, I appreciate that, and we also had a special pre-debate analysis show yesterday from the Reagan Library. I'm sure you've been there.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fascinating place. 1 to 4 p.m., so we've been all over the place, but look, and thanks for saying that, Congressman. I really make an effort to get out because if you sit in the studio, you can just learn so much. It's by getting out, talking to real people, engaging with the candidates. I mean, I got to talk to a majority of the candidates last evening and their staffs for a few minutes over the course of the evening, both the undercard and the overcard debate. And you get information and insight you simply can't obtain by sitting in the office, as you know, and that's why you also take many trips to find out what's happening. Let's get to the debate, Congressman. I'm sure you watched it. I know this is a little dicey because tough to give your analysis when a lot of these guys and gals are your friends, but what was your take last night on the overall debate and kind of how you think it turned out, and what you thought about the tactics of the questioning where they were doing a lot of the personal stuff, tit for tat? What did you think of the whole thing?
Hey, well, John, listen, we're going to have a great interview, but maybe I should have told you when you booked me on this thing. I have my own way of looking at these debates. I always look at it on demand. We had a lot of meetings last night, and I knew I'd catch it on demand. But let me tell you, I know enough about it and have watched enough of the clips even this morning to get a sense of it. And, I know how you feel about Trump. And, look, there's such a deep appeal here, but I think he's really like a red apple among, 12 or 15 green apples. And I think that, he's getting this attention because there's this visceral anger and frustration that's built up in our country about where we're headed. I had a classic example of it yesterday on a regulatory matter, and I just kind of let loose and mentioned, the gut sense of the American people. But I also believe that the temperament that we need in a president, man or woman, the judgment, the wisdom, and I think some of the wisdom that, Ben Carson demonstrates consistently. I know his delivery last night was not what it could have been, I think, but I don't think in the end that the American people are going to elevate, at least the Republicans are not going to elevate Donald Trump to be our nominee. And I have, some other folks on that platform that I'd like to see elevated. But as Donald said, I'll support the nominee because that's absolutely critical, and I'll do so with all I've got.
Well, I think he's going to be the nominee because after last night, I don't see how anybody stops him. I think he's going to win these early primaries, get a majority of delegates on Super Tuesday. The only guy that could have possibly stopped him is Jeb, and I really don't see it.
No, I don't think that. No, he's not going to be the one to stop him. I mean,
on that, we can agree to disagree. One of us is going to be right, and one of us is going to be wrong. Let's get to the Syrian refugee crisis. Here's what's bothering a lot of people. Right now, President Obama says, well, humanitarian reasons, we need to immediately take 10,000. Everybody knows that's only going to be a down payment on many others to come in. People are looking at this and saying, well, wait a minute. They have to travel over an ocean, yet countries in the Middle East, rich countries, aren't taking any of them. Qatar, Kuwait, the Saudis, Arab Emirates, Dubai, Egypt. It's tough for people to say, let's bring more refugees into the United States. They're not taking them, and we're going broke. How does this work?
No, listen, decisive leadership is needed in this hour, and I think it's required of all who seek or serve in public office on these things. And John, I'm in firm opposition to taking refugees. I believe that we ought to, in the alternative, have a massive humanitarian effort as best as we can put together to assist those who are displaced. It is a horrible human tragedy. So many families and children are dying. I mean, look, my heart as a grandfather and father, the empathy level could not be any higher. But that said, the right response is not to open up America at this point. We already have a serious immigration challenge that's before us, and instead to have the will and the discipline to put the influence where it's needed, and that's to address the fundamental reasons why people are fleeing their homeland. Because ultimately, that's the only solution that's going to work is to get the situation there in such a place where they have a place to go home to, because that's where they want to go home to. That's their home.
Well, then why are they fleeing? I think one of the other things that bothers people...
Well, ultimately, John, after things get better is what I mean.
Right, but so many of these are males. I mean, you look at refugees throughout history, it's normally women, children, older people. You look at them now, you look at the photos of them, you got all these young, healthy males. Why don't they go back to Syria and fight for their homeland?
Well, I absolutely agree with you on that, John. And, we've said before, like in Iraq and those areas, unless and until the Iraqi people find within themselves the willingness to sacrifice for their country, including, if needed, the sacrifice of life, to fight for that which they believe, then no effort on our part is going to raise up an Iraq that's sustainable, at least in any type of with any type of values that we're going to find in common. I mean, it has to be within the people, and at the root of this is that there's a radical Islam mindset that elevates death over life. We've talked about this, but that's at the root of so much of this, and they're going to have to. That's a matter of the mind and the heart and what they believe, and ultimately they've got to pivot on that, or we're in for decades and decades of a rough slog here.
Congressman, let's get to the looming budget crisis coming up. Your leadership has already said, look, we're not going to have a shutdown. You've got some conservatives up in arms wanting to fund Planned Parenthood. But, at the end of the day, Obama can veto anything. You're not going to override the veto. Yeah. So what's the plan? Well,
John, just last night, one of the reasons I didn't watch that debate, I had things I was working on, but I went to our conference. It was a special conference called for this purpose. And at the end of the conference, right at the end, seeing that there was no solution, and there really wasn't. I mean, it's a genuine conundrum. I mean, there's not a person that can say, here's just the easy path and the green light's on and it's, walk in the park. No, that's not what's before us. And by the way, our conference is united in wanting to defund Planned Parenthood and provide alternatively the services that are needed for women, low-income women, and the health things that are needed, but not an organization that has the record that they have. So what I said at the end, realizing that really there wasn't a definitive solution, I said, look, this is quite unconventional, but I think it could work. There are 7 states that are really, we know for sure, are the source of these videos and those Planned Parenthood. I'm not saying they're not taking place in other states, but we know for sure, we've got the evidence there. We need to get that message out to the American people. But I said, look, let's put an affirmative vote on the floor. Let's put a vote on the floor that says, hey, we're going to fund specifically and exclusively these 7 states and Planned Parenthood. Of course, it would fail. It would fail in the House and the Senate. I know that we'd pick up Democrats on that. We'd have to. We'd put pressure on them, moral pressure, the good type. And then with that established, that clear precedent established, we'd say, all right, we're going to fund everything but, in a CR or whatever, we're going to fund everything but those 7 states. And, John, I realize what I just said to you was a compromise, but I'll tell you, it's a principled compromise, and it would advance the cause. Chris Smith, who no member of Congress has fought more for this than Chris Smith over the last, hard to believe, 35 years. He stood up and said, I have never seen a conference more united, our leadership more united in trying to do the right thing in this area, but we have got to get this right. And member after member stood up and said, look, the Democratic playbook is what? Get us to shut down the government. It would have ramifications in Virginia, on the House and Senate in Richmond. I'm convinced of this, and on and on. Not to mention the damage to national security and other things. So it's not an easy thing, but, a lot of members were coming up to me after that and said, that might work. It's atypical, but frankly, we're in an atypical environment here.
You know, Congressman, that when that goes down, a lot of people are going to be upset, and they're going to be saying, look, the Republicans aren't fighting. They're not standing up to Obama. We're going to raise the debt ceiling again. We had this watershed election. I mean, it's a replay of an album that I can put it in, and it's going to all start up again.
Let's be clear. Are you saying what I just described as a replay? No. What's
really
a replay? No, what's a replay, John? The replay is a shutting down the government with no way out. That's the replay.
Get everybody that I can predict what the outcry is going to be. So what is your response back to that? How do you get people to understand
well,
that,
I'll give it to you. I'll tell you what political reality is.
In there, your hands are tied.
John, look, I deal with fiscal reality. I deal with political reality. I mean, I am here to get something done. And, if we were if we were in a good situation, headed in the right direction, gridlock would be, you could lock in on it and I'd go home, frankly. But that's not our situation. We're in a bad situation, headed in the wrong direction. And so you got to look at it and say, are we going to do the same thing? If we keep calling the same play that we played before and we get smacked on it, do you think that I can, and really the rest of America can sit there and watch us as we don't fund critical things, we damage our economy, and we don't, nothing, I'm telling you, it's not going to get done. There's not a person in the conference, even those who are advocating not a dollar under any circumstances. Okay, well, that's my desire, but I'm just telling you, we don't live in that world. You've already got Mitch McConnell saying that's not going to happen. So what I said was, and what I advanced last night was real progress. If it was implemented, it would be the first time. Think about that, John. The first time that we've ever defunded Planned Parenthood organizations that are, if we were doing to puppies, if we were doing to puppies what they are doing with children, I mean, the American people would be up in arms. We've got to get the American people to understand what's going on. And there are very few people that grasp exactly what's happening there. And, the sale of human parts that are unlawfully and inhumanely, there is no humane way to do it, but inhumanely, and breaking the law and modifying abortion to harvest the organs. It's horrific. But this would be actually meaningful progress. Otherwise, I'll be talking to you down the road and you say, well, Scott, shut down with 16 days and and Planned Parenthood is still being funded all across the country. I'll say, yeah, well, I had a better plan earlier. And listen, I always tell people in my organization, whether it was a business or a congressional office, look, are we better off than we were the month before? Are we moving things forward? I celebrate small successes. And that would not only be a success, I think it'd be significant. So I could stand up before any group in the 2nd Congressional District of Virginia or anywhere across the country and not only defend, but defend with principle and with passion the plan that I articulated and shared with my colleagues last night. And frankly, nobody's got a better plan.
Well, Congressman, you have to start with a plan, and so I appreciate that. And if I could just share my position on this government shutdown, it would be a disaster for Virginia, especially for Virginia Republicans, because it would happen right before the local state elections in November. That Terry McAuliffe and the Democrats are going to bang Republicans over the head with that. It would be a disaster. Any chance that the Republicans have to hold the Senate in Virginia goes away. It's going to cost them seats in the House, and you can't get anything out of it anyway. So, I mean, I don't know why shutting the government down is a reasonable strategy.
Well, it's not, John, and I've already received calls, and I'm not going to say from who, on that point, the point that you're making about what happens in Washington ripples on down, and not insignificantly, to the state elections, both House of Delegates and the state Senate. Now, I'm not really sure what you're advocating, if you do have a specific position, because I thought you were saying, Scott, hunker down, shut it down, and wait till, we all go underwater, and we just wait to see who's going to, gasp first, and and bolt up to the surface for air. Is it 3 days? Is it 4 days, 21 days, or whatever? All the while our national security is being damaged. All the while our economy is being damaged. And when I meet my friends who are just so passionate, as I am in my heart, I don't yield anything to someone on their, whether their heart's as passionate about mine, about the protection of the unborn. But we have to look at the consequences and roll this thing outright. And I thought it was very telling and instructive to us. We're supposed to be careful about what we say and not tweet anything about conference and everything, but I know Chris Smith would be proud of, and okay with me saying this. And Trent Franks stood up, one of our strongest pro-life members, and he said, let's give this some thought. Pace yourself. The Benghazi investigation, look at this. These aren't Trent's words, but these are mine. But look, the Benghazi investigation is unearthing powerful misdeeds and I believe leading to criminal misconduct here. And we are investigating in 3 separate committees the activities of those Planned Parenthood operations. And there are some things that are being gleaned and learned through the Benghazi investigation that are not yet public, and they shouldn't be. But the oversight role of Congress is a critical one, and it's the representation of the American people to say, hey, are things going as they should? It's not a perfect system, but it works generally. And the same diligence and the same fortitude and the cadence, the persistent, steady cadence that's being advanced by the Benghazi Committee. And look, I would have loved to have had the results 3 months ago. Who wouldn't? But it takes time to do this, and the pressure is going to be on, and is on now. Is on now, and it wasn't before in any discreet way. It's on the organizations that are, I think, having a war on children. It's not a war on women, and I outright reject that. It's a false claim. Among the most passionate who are making the case for all of these things are women, in advocacy of our children. And we're not talking about, this isn't about Roe v. Wade. This is about people who are breaking the law right now. The law is as it's written right now. And I'd like to think that even those who hold a different view on the general topic would say, we've lost our moral center on this. This is just an affront to humanity. Man, that's the kind of, we've got to find that kind of common ground of, this is common ground, just to say that, and I don't even want to describe these things on the radio, and people were even getting somewhat choked up as they were trying to work through some of these things last night and describing them. It's not who we are as Americans, and I'd like to think it's not, even for those who hold a different view on the overall topic. This is indefensible. What they were doing and what they are doing, I believe, is indefensible.
Well, thanks so much for Congressman Rigell for that analysis. It looks like in the midst of that, in the last couple of seconds, we just lost John.
Okay, well,
and he's back.
Okay, all right.
Sorry about that, Congressman. Sorry about that.
Hey, that's okay.
Remote
Listen,
here at the Reagan Library. But look, the last government shutdown we had, and I know we're out of time. We have to get out. 2013. The only thing it accomplished was electing Terry McAuliffe governor of Virginia. Absent that shutdown, which accomplished nothing, Ken Cooley wins. So all it did was elect Terry McAuliffe governor of Virginia. I think whatever compromise you have to figure out in there, you've got to make work until you can get to January 2017.
We're in agreement on that, John. It's nice to be. Listen, have a great day in California. Try to move them to the right a bit out there, okay?